1 out of 7 people in India are going through something which
1 out of 7.
1 out of 7, this is WHO's studies, okay, is going through a diagnosable mental health condition.
What do we do when we notice someone around us, not necessarily a child, but someone around us looks like they need help?
If you feel that the person is at risk for self-harm, then you treat it exactly the way you would treat someone getting a heart attack.
In your daily practice, how many children do you meet who are suicidal?
So I think I see 4 to 5 kids maybe a week.
What is the ideal age, in your opinion, that a child or young adult should be allowed social media?
It's not about the age, it's about the emotional maturity of the child. Social media is causing a lot of damage, to a child's self-esteem. People will say, oh, I'm thinking for the last 2 years that I should come and meet you. Well, do I look so scary? No, but you'll give me medicines. Okay, I've heard you'll give me shocks. I said, psychiatrists are not waiting to catch hold of people and give them shocks.
Dr. Anjali Chabria, celebrated psychiatrist who is joining us now to talk about various things about parenting, about generally having healthier minds and healthier emotions, and also about suicide. You wrote a book called Death is Not the Answer. And as a parent, for me, the idea of a child who takes their own life because of harassment in school or any of these other reasons is so scary. How do you avoid that? How, as a parent, can you protect your child from suicide while also not wrapping them in silk and sort of keeping them from the world?
Absolutely. I think the worst thing that can happen to a parent is losing their child. And then when somebody loses their child to suicide, it's like a double responsibility. You feel guilty. You feel as if you've done something wrong, But of course, as we are seeing so many young people die of suicide, this is a question that, I'm asked almost every day, because there are parents who do so much, who read so much, who are like, living examples of how people should be, who are calm, hardworking, spend all their time with their children, want their children not to be mollycoddled, want their kids to be resilient. So, see, definitely there are a lot of reasons why suicide happens.
So tell me first, in your daily practice, how many children do you meet who are suicidal?
So I think I see 4 to 5 kids maybe a week.
4 to 5 children a week?
Yeah.
In what age groups?
Yeah. The youngest I've seen was a 6-year-old. Okay. And of course, most of them are in their teens, right from 13 to 18. Okay. And of course, we have young adults too, So it's like, they could be in any of these age groups.
You said the youngest child you have seen as a suicidal individual is 6 years old.
Yeah.
How is a 6-year-old processing this information?
And that was not even today. Like, it's not in today's day and age where, kids are aware of suicide. This was, in fact, when I was working in KM Hospital. Okay. And this kid was brought and, she had consumed her mother's tablets. Okay. And she fooled a lot of people saying that, oh, मैंने मीठी गोली समझ के खा ली. Okay. And I was like, let me spend some time with her. So, with little kids, of course, you do play therapy with them.
Yes.
Okay. And while I was playing with her, she said, मैंने पिक्चर देखी, उसमें वो हीरोइनी थी, वो दवाई खा के मर गई. Okay, this is while we were chatting. And I said, क्यों मर गई? क्योंकि वो बहुत दुखी थी. So, and then we started finding out what was happening in her house. And this was an intelligent girl. She felt her brother was getting more attention, okay, than her. And how does she verbalize it? She says, एक ग्लास का दूध एक दूध का ग्लास होता है, वो मेरे भाई को मिलता है, मुझे नहीं मिलता है।
Hmm.
ओके, तो मतलब मैं मर सकती हूँ क्योंकि मुझे कोई प्यार नहीं करता है। Okay, that was her way of thinking.
Hmm.
Okay, that no one loves her, so it's better if she dies. Of course, she had seen it in a movie at that time. At that time, we used to have these Hindi movies which were played, Bollywood movies which were played every Sunday.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm talking about back then. You know, of course, these days kids have lot of more information. In fact, there's an information overload. Okay, and many a times they they start spending time with social media. Okay, and parents, maybe they're busy, maybe they feel it's okay, everybody is spending time on social media, and they do not really have access to what they're watching. Okay, and we cannot keep our young ones away from what's also happening in the world. And I think, barring a few channels like yours, everybody is just breaking news, showing all the possible negativity, and the kids know everything that's happening in the world.
So, actually, this is a question I wanted to ask you because we regularly come across news stories of people who've taken their own lives or died by suicide. Um, every time I look at it, I'm like, should we even carry this information? If you don't publish the information, you're not giving the problem the attention it deserves.
True.
What is the best way to deal with this information?
So I think we do not need to glamorize suicide. We do not need to show how the person died by suicide. Okay. And yes, we need to probably follow it up with some solutions. But
Yeah.
from your point of view, saying exactly what happened, okay, avoiding the blame game and trying to find answers, to, okay, how do you deal with kids? And maybe you could have a debate
Hmm.
on your channel and get people to talk and see what comes up. Of course, today we know that spending too much time on social media causes anxiety, causes depression in children, you know, and many a times it is the anxiety which goes unnoticed, which needs to be addressed.
What is the ideal age, in your opinion, that a child or young adult should be allowed social media? Australia has said 16.
Yes, yes, yes. See, I think, it's not about the age, it's about the emotional maturity of the child. Okay. And what you're doing with it. Now, I mean, it's like today, if in India, if you're going to tell people below the age of 16 not to watch anything, that's not going to be possible.
Hmm.
So today, even if you have a 6, 7, 8-year-old child and he or she is learning on YouTube,
Hmm.
or on any channel, if they're learning something, the amount of information that they can get is great.
Yes.
It is only when they are left unsupervised,
Hmm.
okay, and they start playing too many games, okay, because that's how it starts.
Okay.
I'm playing a game on whatever channel. Okay, now what is the game teaching you? The game is teaching you to win all the time. Okay, it's teaching you strategies to win. Okay, now again, someone may argue and say that, but all games teach you strategies.
Hmm.
Why only online? Online, you're playing alone. Okay, sometimes you're playing with strangers. Okay, and every time you win, your dopamine is going up higher and then it's getting you addicted.
Hmm.
Okay, so definitely, if you're playing a game of Monopoly with a family, it is you are with your family. Okay, you're spending time together. There is some chit chat going on. Okay, it's going to take you time. So, to answer your question, it's not one particular age. Someone at the age of 8 may be emotionally mature to handle that information. or even if they come across some information, as a parent, how do you handle that?
Yeah.
How do you turn that? Because, I get a lot of questions where people say that, my child is watching all these bomb blasts and terror attacks and all that. What is happening in the rest of the world? What do I do? He or she already knows this information. Okay. I tell them to start using that as a starting point to help them become empathetic adults.
Hmm.
Talking to them about what is right and wrong and not overloading them with that, you know, and then using that in day to day examples. Like, for example, when you go for a walk, you see a plant that is not being watered.
Hmm.
If you just open your bottle of water, the child is learning from that, helping them have discussions on this.
How do we teach children to be emotionally and mentally resilient? Because obviously, the one constant in life is disappointment
Right,
and failure
right.
and heartbreak, right? It's everywhere. You cannot, as much as we would like it, we cannot protect our children from these things. But how do we help them build emotional and mental resilience so they can handle disappointment and heartbreak and failure?
See, two things I have seen over the last 35 years that I've been working. One is whatever you say does not help them, it's what you do and how you react,
Hmm.
when you're going through some kind of a situation. Okay, because kids are watching you all the time. Okay, so the calmer you are, the chances that your kids are going to be calm and going to be able to deal with a situation, so you have to actually model it to them.
Hmm.
That is one thing. Second is how much information do we share, so they need to understand that, as you said, disappointments are a part of life, so I tell a lot of parents, maybe start playing simple games at home where you're teaching them to name emotions.
Hmm.
Over dinner, of course, you don't want any television on, nothing on, where you're spending time with each other, keeping all your gadgets away, you're looking into each other's eyes, and then discussing how your day was. Okay. And at that time, even if you start playing a small game like, okay, so what was the high point of your day?
Hmm.
The high point of my day was when someone did something nice for me. Or what was your low point of your day?
Hmm.
I thought the teacher will call my name, and I felt, you know. So then these are things. And of course, if they have siblings, so if there are
Yeah.
four people playing these games, so start by that. Okay. Of course, teaching them by example. Three is discussing, your low moments
Hmm.
and what you felt and how you handled it, you know. So, I mean, my younger brother, I think, Atul Khatri, and I do this show in colleges, which is called the
Yeah.
Shrink and Nut.
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm the shrink and he's the nut. And we talk about handling day to day situations. While we were growing up, there were times where we did not have enough money,
Hmm.
but we did not stop having fun.
Yeah.
So, this whole equation, that money brings you fun.
Yeah.
What did we do? We went on the beach and we played with sand. It was free, it was available. Okay. But again, that was because our parents, they just said, we don't have money, so don't ask us for extra things. Now it's an emergency time. Okay. And we just understood.
Hmm.
And in fact, we would go with piggy banks and say, Dad, you want some money? So how our parents teach us is how we learn.
Yeah.
So whatever happens in the world, if you have a strong, it's like a strong tree that may shake but not fall. So we need to help them to deal with it. Okay, so even if there are breakups, if there are disappointments,
Hmm.
allowing them to talk about it.
How do you explain, or how do you start to talk to a child about death? Death of a grandparent, death of a loved one.
Yeah. So I think it should be done very naturally.
Hmm.
Okay. And depending on, you know, I remember my daughter was 2.5. Okay. And once we were passing through Bandra and she saw those, those birds in cages. And she said, I want to buy this. Okay. Now, This is not something we encourage. But I said, okay, let's take the bird home. Sure enough, it was a sick bird. Okay. And the next morning, the bird died. And here was this 2.5 upset. Okay. And what she told me was really interesting. She says, I hate Shiv Bhagwan. I'm like, where did Shiv Bhagwan come into this? Because of his own child, he cut off the head of an elephant and put it on the child's head. Okay, I'm like, I've never thought of this. Okay. So she cried and, she was very upset. And I kind of calmed her down. I didn't say anything. When she was going to school in the morning, she woke up. She went to school. I sent a little note, and I told the teacher, I said, I don't know how to handle her. She's very upset because of this. How do I explain that to her? Okay. The teacher of 2.5 to 3.5-year-olds has spoken to a classroom of kids and said that, people die, okay, their body becomes old, and different religions have different beliefs, something that the soul is going to be passed on. Okay, then we also, we don't normalize the house immediately. Okay, it's all right to grieve. You are going to miss your parent. You are going to cry, the grandchild. But when families come together, these are all grieving processes which really help. So depending on what age, we must not hide it from them, okay, and yet explain it to them in a language that they will understand.
As a family that has people of different age groups, what are the signs one should look for? Or what are the first telltale signs that someone is in distress?
So, 1 out of 7 people in India today are going through something which
1 out of 7.
1 out of 7, this is WHO's studies, okay, is going through a diagnosable mental health condition. Okay. So definitely there are people in every family. Okay. Now what do we see? We see changes in mood. Okay. The commonest thing is loss of interest in daily activities, in pleasurable activities. Okay. Sleep cycles may reverse. Appetite may either someone is overconscious or is eating, the weight may either drop or increase. But most often we see irritability and sleep changes. Okay. Insomnia is the first symptom. When someone loses their sleep, of course, not for 1 or 2 nights, or not when you're traveling, but if you're losing your sleep constantly, that means your brain is overworking. Okay. And of course, there is stress, which everybody goes through. Then there is distress when you're going through something unusual. Now, we need to identify the symptoms of distress so that they do not become disturbance or depression, etc. Okay. And that is the time you have a conversation with the person, which is actually the most difficult thing to do,
Yeah.
because there's so much stigma associated with going to a mental health professional even today, And I think that is the first step.
I read somewhere that for young adults, teenagers, young adults, even young people who have just
Right.
started working, that the great way to get them to talk about something is to do something together, to keep your hands busy. So do some gardening or go for a walk or go cycling together, or do something together, and not do this, let's sit down on the couch and actually talk, because that
Right.
makes them want to run.
Right.
Because they feel cornered and then they
Yeah.
want to run. Is that something you recommend as well? So it's just an adult version of play therapy?
Definitely. Definitely. When you're spending time with someone where your focus is not, okay, let's get to the bottom
this.
of it. Yeah. Of course, doing something. With younger kids, when they go to sleep,
Right.
that's the time they want to talk about everything that's bothering them. So I tell parents that there are few times that you must try and be around.
Be around for bedtime. Yeah.
Bedtime, then when they wake up in the morning
Right.
and they're going to school, if you can be there when they come back from school.
Yeah.
And meal times, of course.
Yeah. So actually, I have a 3-year-old, and my 3-year-old's teacher told us as parents something very sweet and interesting, and she said, we see parents pick up their children and they, what did you do today?
Exactly.
What did you do? And the child has no answer. But if you instead tell the child what you did today, and then the child will reciprocate with the information of their own. And it's really, so for me, I started doing it in the beginning, and then it became such a routine that as soon as I picked up my son, he would say, what did you do today? What have you been doing since you dropped me off, Mama? And then I would have to have these roundabout ways to get him to talk about his day, like what color was your teacher wearing today, and did your friend bring watermelon in his dabba, and did you share his dabba? And then it will come out the rest of the things. So it's already quite a quite a challenge.
No, in fact, actually, even if you don't say anything,
Yeah.
what they want is that warm hug.
Yeah.
And actually, that's also what you want,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then let the conversations happen naturally, because at the end of your workday, you're also tired. If someone says, what did you do today? Say, yeah, it's okay, I don't want to tell you what I've done today.
Yeah.
But when they go to sleep, mama, you know what happened, this is what happened, and that is what happened. You want them to sleep, but this is what
Yeah.
they want to talk to you about.
I do want to talk to you about ChatGPT, because it's this whole new sort of environment when it comes to mental health, right? I know I use it a lot for medical purposes, where especially when caring for a senior parent and it gets really complicated.
Right.
ChatGPT is a great way to like organize medication and draw out charts and things like that. But I do know a lot of young people now who are using ChatGPT as a quasi therapist,
Yes.
saying, I'm feeling really down today, or I'm feeling very anxious today, I'm worried about this, and then having the bot sort of respond to you. What is the risk of that?
I think it's extremely dangerous. Okay, because ChatGPT is designed, okay, to mirror you and to support you. Okay, and to just give you the information that you're looking for. Okay, it's not your friend.
Yeah.
It's not your parent. It's not your teacher. It's not going to correct you. In fact, the danger of ChatGPT is that I think in future we are only going to have a relationship with ChatGPT, because ChatGPT never tells me when I'm going wrong.
It's like a hard on it.
It never corrects me. It's just nice to me all the time. Who doesn't want someone to be nice to them all the time?
Yeah.
So what is your expectation of other human beings? You'll never be able to get along with someone. In a real world, people have their own problems.
Yeah.
People have their own issues. They are not going to give you the answers that you want. So this is definitely something that, one has to be really able to use it and never use it as a therapist.
A lot of the young people I have spoken to, and this, I don't know if this is a post-COVID thing or it's just otherwise, they report a lot of feelings of emptiness. There's a lack of purpose. There's a lack of, there's a lot of loneliness living in big cities by themselves, away from their parents. Are you noticing a lot of this as well?
Yes.
What is the pattern you are seeing?
So loneliness is something, of course, after COVID, this was something that we saw. People were feeling alone. People did not know, and they were feeling, and there were houses, and everybody was feeling like that. Of course, people did lots of things at that time, played games, sang songs, did all of that, and forgot about all of that
Immediately after.
immediately after COVID. But young people, what happens is that today's young generation, now I'm talking about, say, 25 to 35.
Yes.
The young adults who are living in cities today, somewhere what has happened is that even for them, their real connections have got replaced, with online connections. Okay. And sometimes just simple things, have become difficult. Sleep. Okay. I actually have to tell young adults today that, listen, please sleep. Switch off your lights. Switch off all your gadgets before you sleep. Okay, they say, but what if I keep music on? I can't sleep. I don't want any stimulation. Because without stimulation, you will sleep better. Eat. It's almost become fashionable to not eat healthy. A lot of people may say they are eating healthy, but you're obsessing about food. Okay, we have a lot of choices today, but do we really need to think of food so much? Keep it simple. you know Getting exercise does not mean going to the gym. You can go for a walk, you can go cycling, you can go running up and down the steps. You can, some advice that I actually give young people is, have you ever danced on the table with full music going on in your house? Dance as if no one is watching. Enjoy, like, let your body move. Okay. And yes, and have connections with people. But you know what, I think having real friends, meeting your friends, earlier people would just walk into people's houses. Now no one does that
Yeah.
because I don't want to invade. Okay, I always tell people, ask your friends what they think. If you're going through a breakup, if you lose your job, tell 5 people about it.
Mm.
Because otherwise, what is happening is it's just going on in my head. I'm going on overthinking, over analyzing, going the same route, and then expecting different outcomes. But the minute you go chat with your friends,
Mm.
they'll probably tell you that, I wish you had broken up earlier because we could see your relationship was not working.
Yeah.
So if you go out and share it,
There's also a fear of, oh, people will see me as a failure. If I failed at something at work, let's say I lost my job or I've broken up with someone, I've gone through a divorce or whatever the case may be, I'm afraid to talk to people about it or to go out and socialize because I think people are looking at me and saying, oh, look at this failure. How do we get over that?
So the fact of the matter is that no one has the time to look at you. People are looking at themselves. Okay. But at the same time, you have these 3, 4 friends, the chaddi bundis that we call them. Pick up the phone and call them up. Okay. And they love you for who you are.
Yeah.
You have your relatives. You have that aunt who you get along with, or that uncle. You need to reach out. And of course, if you don't find those people, there is always therapists you can reach out to. Mental health professionals are trained to help you to navigate such times of your life. And sometimes what has happened is, without realizing it, you've fallen into a depression
Yeah.
where you think people are looking at you, but actually no one is looking at you. But you're viewing the world with a negative glass. And that negativity is because your body is positivity has drained. Your brain is functioning differently. And once you start taking the treatment for that, things change in a few weeks. The circumstances are the same.
Do you find that there is still a lot of stigma of seeing a therapist, asking for help?
It's definitely reduced, okay, but it's still there, okay, and it's there everywhere. I have the smartest people in their field, okay, thinking that, oh my God, why am I so weak? Why do you have to give me medication? Why can't I get out of it?
On my own.
Yeah. I said, if you have pneumonia, you need medicine.
Yeah.
Okay, you have malaria, you need medicine. You can't say, why the hell did the mosquito bite me? I should be strong to get over malaria and dengue without any medication. Okay, similarly, today, more and more research is telling us that mental health disorders are because of different issues with the pathways in the brain. You do a brain scan and you'll know that when you are going through depression, which is clinical depression, where you need medical treatment for it, there is your left prefrontal cortex is slowing. Your right prefrontal cortex is, the impulses are very fast. Okay. So this is what you can see today. So there are parts of the brain which are affected, and that is not going to go away.
Unless you take your medication.
Yeah. I mean, medicine will help you in that. Otherwise, say for example, postpartum disorders.
Yes.
People don't take medicine for it.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, a mother who is not feeling her best, okay, it's going to affect the mental health of her child. Instead, if she takes medication, she gets out,
Yeah.
of the depression. Her energies are there. She's going to give her child the best.
Yeah.
Otherwise, one person not well affects the entire family. you know. So and these days medicines are not what they used to be. You take antidepressants for maybe a few weeks and you're fine. You get out of it. You know, I have taken antidepressants 2-3 times in my life. I'm here in front of you, you know, and there is no problem, there's no stigma. You know, fortunately, I realized, I said, this is not me. Why am I feeling like that? I spoke to a few of my friends. I said, just take this for a few weeks and that's it. There's no shame.
For a, for an average person, there's a feeling of, I'm feeling a little down for a day, for 2 days, for maybe 3 days. How do you know between the fact that you're just going through a phase and you're actually depressed and you need to do something about it?
So, depression is when this feeling is going on for weeks.
Okay.
Okay, there's a difference between burnout and depression. Okay, there's a difference between having a bad day and being in clinical depression. Okay, with your clinical depression, you may have problems with appetite, problems with sleep. You know, your energy levels don't feel the same. Okay, if it's a burnout, okay, you take a holiday, you feel better. You know, but in depression, you will see that none of this is working. Okay, and the best way is to go meet a doctor and find out what it
Find out.
is. You know, today we have certain forms that you can fill up online. Okay, and everything, all your scores come out.
Yeah. There is
over
a
there.
test. There's an online test for depression
Yeah,
that will give you a score.
lots of tests. You know, and then that is our, like, when we do the test, we share the report and we tell people, keep this report with you, so that if you're going anywhere in the world, this report will help you.
There's also, we have sort of a daily level of anxiety we feel simply from the lives we lead, right? How do we know whether this is a normal amount of anxiety or I'm going through something. This is part of the
See,
disorder.
there is something which is called as eustress. EUSTRESS.
Okay.
Okay, that's the optimum amount of anxiety which is required. Okay, so for example, if I have to be here on time, I have to leave on time. So I have to plan all that.
Yes.
Okay, but if I'm not anxious about it at all, I'll just be sitting and chilling at home. If I get too anxious that it affects my performance, okay, that's when I know that when the anxiety starts affecting me either socially or
So
occupationally.
you need to be here at 2 o'clock and you're not able to do anything for the rest of the day because all you can think of is I need to be there on time.
Yeah. No, that is too much anxiety.
That's too much anxiety.
Yeah.
And what is the
You know-
solution? Like, I know people who get anxious in that manner before they travel, before they have a flight to catch. They
Right,
won't sleep all of the previous night because they're
Right.
so worried about missing the flight or whatever the case may
right,
be.
right.
What is the solution?
So
to that
now with
anxiety?
such people, okay, what is happening to them? Their anxiety is actually causing the blood pressures to go high, causing the blood sugars to go high. Okay, and it is affecting them, affecting every core of their body. Such people would need help. Okay, whether it is just some amount of therapy because you're a perfectionistic kind of a person, okay, or some amount of retraining, maybe self hypnosis, just some relaxation, okay, or maybe occasionally taking something to reduce their anxiety. Versus if this is something happening to you on a long term basis, I'd rather give you one tablet for stress rather than you increasing your blood pressure, your diabetes, your thyroid, and other
Yeah.
medications.
Just the quality of your life will just.
Yes.
Do we do a lot of comparisons with social media? Because if I'm on social media, if I'm on Instagram, for example, everybody's living a better life than me. You know what I mean? Like everybody's child is like better off. Everybody's home looks nicer. Everybody's car
Holidays.
looks nice. Everybody's holidays. Everybody's meals. People are losing more weight than I am. So everyone has more success than I do on every level on Instagram. How do you battle that? Because I feel like when we were growing up in the 80s, yes, we're that old, you only had to compete with the kids on your street and some bua ji ki beti
Yeah, or your siblings.
or your siblings. Now you have to compete with the whole world. It's it's impossible. Yeah.
Social media is causing a lot of damage, to a child's self-esteem.
Yeah.
Okay, it's giving you information, but somewhere it's only showing you on a daily basis how someone's hair is better or someone's boyfriend is better or somebody's getting more likes, than you are. Okay, and of course, there's also a lot of online bullying that happens,
Yes.
and children are very scared to even tell their parents because parents have warned them. Now they're not going to own it to them. Okay, and they feel embarrassed. They go through, there's a lot of hate mail which can come. I'm sure you get trolled so many times, and even I mean, being so mature and, smart, it will still bother you.
It's hard. You never get used to it.
You
It's
know, you
always
can't.
it's always
So it is, and of course, there are certain, platforms which are worse than the others.
Mm.
Okay, so one has to just limit their time, with social media and make it a conscious decision.
Is there a loneliness epidemic in India right now? In our urban centers, at least?
See, I mean, of course, it's not as much as it would be in the Western countries because we still have people. We are still talking, we are meeting families, we celebrate festivals together. But I think today it's become a choice to meet people.
Hmm.
Earlier, if your parents told you all of you have to be here
Yes.
at 7 p.m. on Sunday,
Yes.
today, can I tell my children that? How can you? You'd never asked us. You never informed us.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what's happening to young adults.
Mm.
I'd rather sit at home, do nothing. Of course, your brain is tired, but I think we have to make an attempt because the loneliness epidemic is slowly creeping. It's creeping into all these huge towers that we see, where a lot of people do not even know who their neighbors are.
Mm.
Okay. And it's not just the Diwali parties or the Christmas parties that we have to be together. We need to be able to go into someone's house and say, oh, I made dal today. What did you make? You made one bangan ka sabzi. Let's sit down and eat.
Yeah.
No fancy meals, no fancy conversations, heart to heart talks,
Mm.
real talks, where I can bare my soul, and not be scared of how I'm going to be judged or whether I'm going to be judged.
A lot of children are constantly bugging their parents to get a dog. Let's get a dog. Is this something you recommend? Having pets?
Highly recommend. I've grown up all my life with dogs. I used to have 5 dogs.
No,
through
but
my
as a
medical
mental health
studies.
professional.
Yes, and now as a mental health professional, I definitely recommend because when an animal teaches a child, okay, especially with the loneliness happening, an animal is always happy to see you.
Yes.
Okay, so the unconditional positive love that an animal can give you, the company that your dog can give you today, okay, it replaces a lot of emotions. Plus, taking care of the animal. As you said, your dog wakes you up every morning. Even if you don't want to get up, you're forced to get up.
Yeah.
Right? And it teaches you empathy. I remember, at times when my dog would be locked up in the bathroom or something, my child who's half asleep will pull his, cover down and say, Mom, I think Pringle is in the bathroom. I said, how do you know? Just by the way he is yelping,
Hmm.
So that is the connection, So definitely, if you can have an animal in the house, I would say go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah. And adopt. And adopt. Go to buy.
Yeah, I do want to ask you this. We are currently, at least in urban India, in this crossroad when it comes to workplace stress. We have people who run businesses who say we're going to have to do 70 hours a week in order to, I don't know, what are we, beating China, whatever our targets are. We have young people who say this is not the kind of life I want.
Right.
It's a very different environment from when you and I started our careers,
Yes.
for example.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How do we find that middle ground? Where do you stand as a mental health professional?
So
On the 70-hour work week or the let's find a work-life balance?
So I think there has to be a balance between both, because of course, we grew up wanting that, not wanting, we had to do the 70-hour week. Okay, in fact, as doctors,
Yeah.
there used to be sometimes 2 nights without sleep.
Yes.
So it just maybe went on to 70 hours. And, but today, of course, a lot of youngsters do talk about work life balance, even the menstrual holidays, which have become, much needed.
Actually, it's very interesting. We have older women or women who have been working for longer who say that by asking for menstrual leave, what you're doing is weakening the battle that we have fought this entire time, where we pushed through the pain in order to say we're no different from men.
Right.
But now by asking for menstrual leave, you're actually saying, you're actually making a difference.
Right.
I mean, I personally believe that our generation fought so that the women today can ask.
Exactly.
So we can put them in a position where they are able to ask. I mean, it was always necessary. We were always in pain.
Yeah.
But just because we lived in an environment where it was not okay to mention it and we had to pretend like everything was okay, I think I take it as a compliment.
Yeah. Yeah.
To the feminism of the of the early 2000s, that we've been able to come to a point where women can ask.
Yeah, yeah. I think I would agree with you on that. I remember fainting at the hospital one day. Okay, and the senior doctor told me, he says, you know what? Because at that time I was trying to prove myself. I had 2 kids at home. Right now, I wanted to be the ideal mother, ideal worker, work at home, then go back home, take care of both of them. Okay, and no one was asking me to do it. I wanted to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I actually fainted at work, and the doctor understood. He's saying, I think you should go and sleep for half an hour and then do whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
There's no need.
Because I feel like that's a burden of our generation. Even today, I'm constantly trying to prove that my home and my child are not suffering because of my work.
Exactly.
Like they're okay. I've made sure they're okay. And it's not my only. It's nobody's expecting it. It's a burden we have placed on ourselves.
Right, right, right. You know, once I asked my kids, I said, do you want me to be a full-time stay-at-home mom? They said, no. Please go to work because, you meet us nicely on Sundays. You're so happy. Imagine if you're sitting every day with us, what would happen? So sometimes what happens is it's experiences, that teach you that you do not have to, do everything proper.
Going back to the beginning of our conversation, right? If there's a woman working as a doctor, she's working, she's running a business, she's not going to be around for bedtime on a regular basis. She'll probably see her children more on the weekends. There is this fear that I will not know what is going on with my kids.
Right.
And find out when it's too late. How do you mitigate, as a working mother, how do you mitigate that?
So what I tell parents is, it is not the quantity of time also, it is also the quality of time. Okay. And actually, it is 10 minutes in a day that you need to be able to connect with whoever's around in the house. And why working mothers, even fathers for that matter, they want to have better relations with their kids, right?
Yes.
So I said that, 10 minutes, if you can do 5 minutes twice, if you can do 10 minutes, like beginning of the day, end of the day. Okay. So even if you're not at home, if your child, you connect with your child when the child comes back from school, take that 10 minutes off work, excuse yourself from the meeting, talk to the child. But when you're with the person, whether it's online or offline, you need to be relaxed and calm.
Yes.
So that the person can actually tell you, and not feel that they're bothering you or they have to answer a checklist.
How do we, what do we do when we notice someone around us, not necessarily a child, but someone around us looks like they need help?
So it depends on what the situation is. Of course, if you feel that the person is at risk for self-harm, then you treat it exactly the way you would treat someone getting a heart attack in front of you. You would leave everything else and you would give full attention to that person. Of course, if the person is getting a heart attack, you'll take them to the hospital. Okay, but here, so for example, if you're at a party and you see someone who is extremely restless, who's drinking too much alcohol, who's walking around near the terrace, that person could be at a risk of self-harm. right? You take the person, you put them in a safe place. Okay, you do not leave them alone. Okay, if required, you take them, take them home or take them to your house or whatever it is, and you stay with them till they are safe. Then you take them to a mental health professional. Okay, allow them to talk without judging before you take them to the doctor. Allow them to talk. Do not tell them, no, 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 everything will become all right, because then you're not validating what they are feeling.
Yeah.
Let them express, let them talk. Okay. Once you think that they have spoken, then you have to convince them, okay, that they need to take help. Sometimes one person cannot do it alone, and you may need the family or the friends to be involved. Okay, if you suspect someone is suicidal, it is not a secret. Okay, you will talk to their family. Okay, even if they tell you, no, 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 you can't tell anyone. Okay, tell them that I'm sorry, I'm not going to keep the secret because I really care for you.
Yeah.
You know, of course, if you see somebody struggling with mental health issues, you can talk to them, not about them. Please do not gossip about them, but talk to them separately and tell them that, I've been watching you, I'm a little concerned about you. Is everything okay? That can become a starting point where the person tells you that, no, I've been suffering this, that.
Yeah.
And then you ask them if they need the resources, and saying that, and if you wish, I'll come with you. Okay. But again, not to gossip.
The nature of relationships have also changed, right? Now, young people take longer to commit. There's something called a situationship, I have understood. Dating has become online. The risks of dating online are different. I feel like there's a difference in the language that the young men and the young women are talking. The women expect something completely different. The men don't understand what is going on. Is that causing a lot of challenges as well?
Definitely. I think no one is as confused about relationships as this young generation is.
Why is that?
So I think because, a lot of times what happens is, even say for example dating, okay, it's so easy to date. Okay, and many a times also there are certain apps. Okay, I mean, you could be at workplace and they'll be notifying you and telling you how many people are there
Right.
in your vicinity. Okay, so one is, it's easy to meet someone. Okay, now of course you may match whatever you want to. You also are aware that the person who's coming here is coming with a lot of, putting on a lot of things. Okay, now the more relationships that you go through is not necessarily something that's really going to teach you more. So the expectation of also being in a relationship, okay, at a very young age,
Yeah.
the expectation of getting physically close to someone or allowing someone to come into my physical space. I don't know whether I want to have the person so close to me, but if I tell that person, how is he or she going to, you know? So my advice to the young people is, first know yourself, before getting into this whole, I need to date or I have to date is more important than I want to date.
Yeah.
So, and it's easy to get attracted to a lot of qualities that you may not have. But once I was discussing this whole thing about arranged marriages versus finding a partner yourself, now what was arranged in the marriage was actually that the families were similar, the food was similar,
Yeah.
the backgrounds were similar.
Yeah.
Now your personalities need to match. Okay, many a times here your personalities may match, but your expectations may not. So having real communication is something. In fact, we've been telling a lot of parents, that when people are getting married, you're hiring everyone except sending your kids for counseling,
Yeah.
because these two adults who are getting married have not even discussed the expectations. Forget, like, if I have to shift, are you going to shift with me?
Hmm.
Okay. Or even financial expectations. Have you just presumed that the girl is going to give me all your money?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe she wants to support her family, maybe whatever she wants to do. These are things you need to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a video on Instagram where a lot of these young men were saying, "Of course, I expect the woman, the girl to come and live with me and look after my parents.
Yes.
That's how it happens." And I found that really astounding because none of the young women I know in that age group
Want to do that?
want to do it or also want to look after their own parents,
Exactly.
right? So there seems to be a mismatch of expectations.
Yeah, and the problem is there's not enough communication.
If you were to put down questions that a prospective couple should ask each other before they commit, what would those questions be?
I think about the real expectations, about their roles as partners, where housework is concerned, where finances is concerned, and where what is that they're looking forward to.
Yeah.
Someone may want to retire, but the other partner may not want to retire. How they're going to share both their vision and their finances and even their responsibilities towards looking after maybe medical needs, or for example, when my husband and I got married, I was like, okay, children are my department, medical is my department, looking after finances is your department.
Right.
And I think that worked. So if schools were considered or whatever, it was my decision. you know and so I think it's important that today people discuss all this, rather than presume.
Yeah.
You presume, you don't communicate, you expect, and then you say you're not expecting. So I think we need to have all these matters discussed, debated, agreed upon. Why, even whether one person may not want to have a child and the other person may want 4 kids. Love is not going to change that. You need to talk about it. You know,
A lot of times people say, हाँ तुम अभी बोल रहे हो कि नहीं चाहिए, but you'll change your mind, you know, a little further down the line.
I tell couples, you'll discuss, fight over it,
Mm.
do what you want, but come up with one solution.
Reach a consensus
Yeah.
before you get married.
Yeah, it's very important because otherwise,
Do we have a
See,
clearer sort of acceptance as a society now that marriage is hard work? Because in our parents' generation, it was very like you have kids and then you sort of stay together for the kids.
Yeah.
And then you just push through, and there was no acknowledgement of how hard it was. There was no acknowledgement of how much each partner has to give up of themselves in order to make this work. As a society now, are we accepting that more?
I think so. And also, what has happened is that today there are a lot of options. Earlier, there were no options. Your mother never went to the gym. Okay. So, what happens is today there are options because
She's
there
meeting other people.
yes.
Okay.
And there are other people who are showing interest in her
Mm.
and getting attracted to her and telling her that she's attractive.
Yeah.
Whereas the two partners may not be sharing intimacy any longer. So there is a possibility of having relationships outside marriage.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's also a possibility about getting remarried. Like, I just met somebody who's now getting remarried at the age of 75.
Good for them.
Okay. And we have people who come to us for treatment, for sexual disorders, and we are seeing the age is going up. So that is also something. So what is happening is that, of course, marriage is hard work, and marriage requires a certain amount of commitment, dedication from both the sides.
Yes.
One person can't endlessly be sacrificing their life. And a lot of things have to also be understood, of course. And I think our goals have to be similar. and your value systems. Everything else can be different, but if your value systems are different, that I feel creates a lot of
Yeah. Those tend
problem.
to be
Yeah,
deal breakers.
yeah. I mean, you can have different political beliefs, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as you align on values, that
Do
can
you think
flow.
that your
Yeah.
couples with different political beliefs are able to keep it together? That's fine. Left wing, right wing,
Yes,
like
yes, yes.
inter-belief marriage.
Yes, yes. No, but I think those couples, their values are okay, then they'll fight
Then they
about.
find a way.
Yeah, but that's okay. They'll stay together.
How important is it for people who feel that their work is not giving them enough work-life balance to look after themselves? How do they draw that boundary without ending up without a job?
So I think one is, of course, I mean, you need the job, that's why you're doing it, right? You also need to put in those extra hours. But, so you do that. But when you're relaxing, at that time, try and switch off completely. So what,
Mm.
I mean, it's like
Compartmentalize?
compartmentalize, or even, you live 100%. So you work and then you enjoy yourself.
Mm.
Take few breaks, okay, whenever you can. And even in your free time, if you can find something that makes you happy,
Mm.
whatever it is, reading, dancing, jogging, whatever you want to do, okay, do that. And also make sure that you have a good friend circle
Yeah.
who you can reach out to even on your way back from work or whatever. And of course, at the side, also look for another job.
We don't talk enough about the mental health of men,
Yes.
especially in India. They don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about them enough. Is there a building issue of men's mental health being
Absolutely.
neglected?
Absolutely. And what happens is, men don't talk about it.
Mm.
So even boys, for example, we are encouraging boys in school also to talk about their mental health. Because typically what happens is if a boy is not feeling good, even if his friends, even if he shares it with his friends, he say, oh, come, 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 let's have a drink.
Yeah.
Let's go for a smoke and let's forget about it. And then no one really talks about it. Okay. And then what happens is all that pressure builds up, builds up, builds up.
Mm.
Their heart starts getting affected. Blood pressure goes up. Silent disorders come up. Okay. And they may consume more substances, more alcohol, to keep everything
numbing it.
down, to
Numb it
numb the pain. Okay. Until, a day that you either get a heart attack and you find yourself in an ICU. And where did it all start? Stress, which was ignored, neglected, and not spoken about. Sometimes even we all talk about how women suffer
Mm.
at the hands of men. But I have seen so many men suffer at the hands of women, who have kind of not appreciated them, not even, harassed them emotionally at every stage, then harass the children,
Mm.
thinking that's the only way to keep the man in the marriage. Constantly put pressure on them, financial pressure. Even for example, the marriages that happen in our country, many a times people cannot afford it. But just because my friend's daughter or son had that marriage, I want you to do it and you're the provider. So I don't care how you get the money.
Mm.
So they borrow money. And then, I mean, imagine standing there at the wedding, pretending to be happy, and then knowing the amount of money that you have to repay later. All that puts a lot of pressure on them.
How
Oh.
can we be better allies of the men in our lives from a mental health point of view?
I think by encouraging them to talk, by supporting them, okay, and also encouraging them to form, support groups is a very, it's a very lay way of saying it. But the actual thing is that we need to encourage them to talk, share, and not feel bad about it. Also identify people who are probably consuming a lot of alcohol, substances, and understand why they're doing it. Okay, of course, because some may already be addicted by the time you do that.
Yes, yes.
But at the same time, I think if we can start doing that, and talking about it.
So if you have a loved one who is consuming a lot of alcohol, drinking every night,
Yeah, yeah.
and they, every time you bring it up to them, they say, no, I've got it under control.
Yeah, so the first step is telling them, okay, let's go for a holiday.
Hmm.
Alcohol-free holiday. Okay, so it's actually saying whether they can do without it or not. The second thing is addressing sleep issues. A lot of disorders start because you cannot sleep. And that's when, you feel, oh, let me just have a drink or so. And then that alcohol is actually suppressing your sleep. It reduces anxiety for that time, but it is suppressing your REM sleep. So your sleep, the quality of sleep is getting worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You also need to encourage men to take medication where it is required, and because if you don't take medicine, your depression is not going to be treated.
Right.
Why men? Everybody for that matter. And you don't treat it, you're just going to keep popping in things rather than
A lot of times
curing.
people though turn around and say, I don't mind talking about my problem, but don't give me pills. Like, I don't want to get hooked
Yeah.
onto the medication.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that a response you hear a lot?
Yeah, I hear it every day.
Okay.
Okay, there are people who say, oh, I'm thinking for the last 2 years that I should come and meet you. Well, do I look so scary? No, but you'll give me medicines. Okay, I've heard you'll give me shocks. I said, psychiatrists are not waiting to catch hold of people and give them shocks.
Yeah.
So the whole stigma slowly going away. In fact, the newer medicines, you can take a tablet in the morning. You don't even have to have a medicine which will make you sleep. And the funniest is that if you look at prescriptions, your gastroenterologist is giving you a medicine, a psychiatric medicine. Your cardiologist is giving you one. Okay. So if the psychiatrist gives it to you, people are hesitant to take. But if you're taking the same medicine from different people,
You're
don't
okay.
even know you're taking it. So this is a myth that medicines make you sleep. Medicines will be forever. It's not true. Okay, if you have malaria, you're not going to take medicines all your life. Of course, there are certain thought disorders like schizophrenia,
Yeah.
or if there is a mood disorder where a person may be required to take a mood stabilizer, just like you would if you have a diabetes or a hypertension, you'll take medicine maybe for your life. So similarly, there are certain conditions, but not in all conditions that we would give medicines for long. So that's a myth that we really need to, push it out of the window.
More people need to see
Yes.
therapists. More people need to be open to taking medication.
Yes. And when you need medicine, therapy may or may not work.
Yeah.
Medicine is going to work. The best is to combine the two.
Dr. Chabra, thank you so much for speaking with me today and answering all of these questions so patiently. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
And thank you for what you do and who you are.
Thank you.